compromise between pro-life and pro-choice. I gave that speech at in Florida, at Tampa, and I got roundly booed for it. So I hope that won't happen, but if it does, I'm ready to take you on with one hand. So let me, thank you. Let me start with what needs to be done in the future and how can we spread libertarianism and economic ideologies we hold dear. Well, I think that's very important that we spread the word. And I asked who were the two most successful people in spreading the word, and perhaps we can emulate them. And one of them was Ayn Rand, who never compromised one iota on anything. And the other was Ron Paul, who also didn't really compromise on much of anything. One example would be the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where he said that this was good in some ways. It got rid of Jim Crow, it reduced lynching, it had more fair voting, but it required that Woolworths serve lunch to people that it didn't want to serve lunch to, namely it violated freedom of association. And Ron Paul stuck to that, even though there were people who tried to knock him out of that. And I think the reason that this is not popular, that people run away from this, is they think that if you discriminate against blacks or Jews or bald people or discriminate against anyone, somehow you hurt them. And the economics of it is that you really don't hurt them, because if you, let's take wages. Suppose that we start off blacks and whites, everybody is equal, nobody's discriminating against anyone, and let's say that everyone has $10 an hour productivity and an equilibrium $10 an hour wage. And all of a sudden, we whites decide to discriminate against blacks, which means that the demand curve for black labor shifts to the left, which means black labor now gets paid less. Let's suppose they get paid $7 an hour instead of the 10. Well, this can't last. This means that every black person, in effect, has a little thing on his lapel saying, if you hire me, you make $3 an hour pure profit. Whereas if you hire a white guy, you make nothing. So anyone who hires a black person will outcompete people who hire white people, and the black wages will rise. So this sort of a thing is impotent. The real damage to blacks or Jews or anyone is pogroms or lynchings or slavery or things like that, namely violations of the non-aggression principle. How can we spread the ideas? I say, I really shouldn't say that we should all emulate Ron Paul and Ayn Rand in never compromising, because compromisers too convert people to libertarianism. I mean, Milton Friedman is a great compromiser as far as I can see, and I'm going to talk a little bit about his compromising. But he's converted a lot of people to libertarianism too. It's Free to Choose, his book, Capitalism and Freedom. There are many, many people who are here in this room and other rooms like this who came from Milton Friedman. I'm an Austrian economist, which means that I'm a subjectivist, which means that there's no one right way to convert everyone because people are different. Some people need a smack in the face, which they get from the Murray Rothbard and me emulating Murray, and other people need this general persuasive, well, now we should privatize the post office. You see why? Well, now maybe we should do something a little more radical and slowly build up. So I would say, when you're trying to go out there and convert the heathen, and I use that word purposefully, do what you love. Do what makes sense to you. Do as you feel. Make the case the best way that you can. We all have specialization in division of labor, and we shouldn't all be forced to be in any one, square peg shouldn't be forced in round holes and vice versa. We should each do our own thing and try to be persuasive. And it's very important that we do, because civilization depends upon it. I mean, to the extent that we're civilized, we're libertarian. And to the extent that we're not, we're not. Let me talk a little bit about Milton Friedman's deviations from the One True Faith. He favors antitrust laws, which means that if a company gets big through selling a better product at a lower price, they can be attacked. I mean, poor Bill Gates, he wasn't paying off any of the boys in Washington, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats. He was out there in some stick city, Seattle, creating great wealth, and he didn't pay off any of the boys in Washington. So they said, we got to get him. Let me tell you my antitrust joke. It's a two-part joke, and I told this once to a bunch of law and economics people who specialize in antitrust. And there's a lot of money in antitrust in favor of and defending against. Here's the joke. There were 3 prisoners in the gulag, and as prisoners do, they compare notes. Why are you in prison? Why are you in prison? And the first guy said, I was in prison because I came to work late, and they accused me of cheating the state out of my labor services. Second guy says, well, I came to work early, and they accused me of brown nosing. The third guy said, I came to work every day exactly on time, and they accused me of owning a Western wristwatch. And I got a laugh from the assembled people. And then I told the antitrust part, the second part of the joke, and it was dead silence. And I said, there were 3 people in prison in the U.S., all due to antitrust laws. And as prisoners do, they compare notes as to why they're in prison. And the first guy said, I charged higher prices than anyone else, and they accused me of profiteering. Second guy said, I charged lower prices than everyone else, and they accused me of predatory price cutting. And the third guy said, I charge the same price as everyone else, which is hard to understand given these other guys, but you have to work with me, it's just a joke. And they accused me of collusion. Dead silence. Dead silence. Oh, no laughing. I mean, you can't say that because then the jig is up. I mean, the point is that antitrust is dead from the neck up. I mean, a legitimate law is if you do it, you're guilty, and if you don't do it, you're innocent. If you murder, you're guilty, and if you don't murder, you're okay. If you rape, bad. No rape, good. Antitrust, higher prices, lower prices, the same prices, guilty. So what kind of law is that? And yet Milton Friedman supports it. Volunteer military. You might think volunteer military is a good thing, because who can be in favor of the draft? But he favored the volunteer military during the Vietnam War as a means of making the U.S. military more efficient, which is sort of problematic from a libertarian point of view if you don't believe that the U.S. was defending the country over in Vietnam from a bunch of guys with funny-looking hats and in rice fields. So I regard that as a deviation from libertarianism. The negative income tax, come on, that's like welfare rights. Tax withholding. Horrible. I mean, if everybody had to pay their whole bill on April 15th, people would say, whoa, this is crazy. Instead, what they do is they get money back. And they say, oh, the government is wonderful. Look, it's giving me money back that I paid, the whole year. Road socialism. I have a book out on privatizing roads. And I once got into a debate with him, and he was saying, oh, private, government roads are legitimate. It's a legitimate government function. So I called him a road socialist. He didn't much like that. I don't understand why. Our socialist highways kill 35,000 people a year. To put that into context, I mean, how many people died in 9/11? 3,000? How many people died from aftermath of Katrina? 1,900? This is 35,000 a year. Now, people blame it on, speeding or texting or vehicle malfunction or this or that or driver error. But those are just proximate causes. The ultimate cause is the road manager. And the road manager is the government. They should deal with these things in a better way. And I think if we had competing road owners, they would be able to. Money, he's horrible on money. Murray Rothbard used to say that Milton Friedman is great on a lot of things. Minimum wage law, free trade, tariffs, rent control. But he specializes in the things that he's no good on. Money, he loves the Fed, whereas our group wants to end the Fed, not monitor the Fed, but end it. And vouchers, school vouchers instead of privatizing schools. There are a whole bunch of other things. He did say we're all Keynesians now, which I take amiss. I once asked him, how do you get your passion for justice? And he said, the search for justice will ruin the world. Anyway, he's more of a utilitarian. He's not a rights-oriented kind of person. But despite the fact that he deviates from the one true path in many ways, he has done yeoman work in converting people. So I say that there are many roads to converting people to libertarianism, and let each person do what he feels best and what he feels most comfortable with. Okay, so that's what needs to be done in the future, and how can we spread the libertarian and economic ideologies we hold dear. Just go out there and promote liberty. Write a book, from a blog, write a letter to the editor, get involved in a high school, in a church, what have you, speak up about liberty and vote for Gary Johnson and things like that. And that's one way to go. Let me talk now about labor economics and how libertarians can attract trade union members. Now, at the outset, you might say, well, attract trade union members, those are the bad guys. And so I asked, what is the libertarian analysis of trade unions? Are the trade unions per se violating the non-aggression principle? And I think it depends upon what they do. There are legitimate things that a union can do, and then there are illegitimate things. And if a union limits itself to the legitimate things, then it's compatible with libertarianism. And if they go past that, then not. So what's the legitimate thing that a union can do? Well, if one person goes to the boss and says, look, boss, I'm making $12 an hour, I'd like a raise to 15, and he's one of 500 workers, the boss is likely to say, my way or the highway, or don't let the door hit you on your rear end on your way out. But if the guy comes in and says, look, I represent all 500 workers, and we all want a raise from $12 to $15 an hour, or whatever it is, and if we don't get it, we're all going to quit. Well, now the boss starts to say, well, I've got contracts, I have to deliver goods, and I have inputs coming out, and I have obligations for outputs. And it's true, these 500 workers aren't the greatest since sliced bread, but they are working together, and I am running an operation. He's more likely to say, well, how about $13 or something like that. He's more likely to take them seriously. And if that's all the union did, that would be okay. Because look, the key element of freedom is the ability to quit. If you can't quit, you're a slave. The only problem with, and I got in trouble with the New York Times, they misquoted me on this. The only